Hey there, gang. It's just going to be a short one this week. I promised to do an addendum video about the Gibson 225 and efforts to counteract the folding that's occurring in the body, so we'll go through that. But first I have to make a new small bench hook shooting board. This is something I use daily, and after a few years they wear out, so I make them every once in a while. The truth is, in the last little while I've been burning the candle at both ends, working on some of these very big, very time-consuming and exacting repairs that don't naturally fall into the get it done and film it in 1 week format that I've been working with the last 3 or 4 years. Usually in multi-week repairs I have other smaller jobs lined up to keep the timeline rolling. The last little while everything has been a big job. So on one hand, that's good, because they tend to be more interesting material for viewing, for you guys. On the other hand, it requires a lot of sustained effort to film and edit, on top of the intense concentration required to do the actual work. Don't believe me? Film yourself doing the most intensive and critical part of your own job, edit it, and then let us all watch. So there have been times recently where I've been going over 70 hours a week in an effort to keep the videos showing up, which, I don't mind. But in the interests of transparency, I thought I'd talk a little bit about what having a YouTube presence can be like for a single person small business that isn't an influencer type, you know what I mean. In the last couple of months, I've heard from 3 different guitar repair friends that they've burned out. This is something that happens on the regular. It's an occupational hazard. This is a dream job that carries with it a lot of stress, completely above the expectations of people on the outside looking in. That's because we're dealing with objects of desire that have way more than just plain sentimental value to their owners. It's mystical in some way. People become irrational about guitars sometimes, and the expectations are therefore extremely high. Dealing with that all day eventually leads to burnout. So I'm trying not to do that, and somehow strike a balance with getting a video out every week. I know it's boring to listen to YouTubers talk about things like the algorithm, but it really does play an integral part in whether it's worth expending efforts on video production, especially if they're time-consuming to make. I've noticed that if I skip a week, my next videos won't be presented to those who aren't subscribed, and the returns dip really significantly, and it takes several weeks to recover. So apart from guitar repair burnout, regular content creators on YouTube are also subject to their own sort of burnout from trying to keep up with all that. I'm not asking for suggestions, just going to do what I do. Sometimes there'll be a shorter, not quite as exciting video like this one in order to allow me to keep bringing you the big fun ones. You can see my attitude to the shooting board is not precious. It's consumable. Let's go back to the ES225 from last week. We ended up reducing the action by a lot, but despite my efforts, the bridge ended up bottomed out in pretty much the same configuration it started with. And this was surprising to me because it was significantly different from my projected result prior to glue up. Looking at the guitar, I can see that the top has collapsed pretty significantly in its center. It's folding inward. This is also a little bit of a surprise because there is a very large block fitted between the braces to support the downward force of the bridge feet. So here I am, once again removing and wrapping up the pickup so I can get inside. I don't want this thing banging around on the top and scratching it up. Here's a quick look at that massive block of maple under the bridge. It really is huge, outsized in proportion, and it's beautifully flamed. It also totally dwarfs the 2 long but kind of light parallel braces in these, just like you'd see in an unamplified Gibson archtop from the 40s. Sometimes the material used for these was up to the task, other times it was a bit weak. In this case, it seems it's a bit weak. Here's a little diagram that greatly exaggerates what's going on for clarity. I will never give up MS Paint. Never. Tension is folding that top inwards, and the braces can't counteract that force. What I propose to do is support the top and jack up those braces using some interior props, not unlike a violin sound post, but in this case they will bear against the underside of the braces. I'll borrow an idea from the posts in a National Resonator guitar. This early one has square pillars holding up the support beams that in turn keeps the sound while holding the cone from collapsing. In later models these would be dowels. The main thing is they're always attached to a wide base or foot that distributes the pressure over a wider area of the back. These are stiff but thin enough to bend with the curved inner contour of the guitar. So I'll mark out some discs on some model maker's plywood. I have to be able to get them through the pickup cavity, so these are about 1.5 inches or 35 millimeters in diameter. I'll cut those out on the bandsaw, clean them up with some sanding. I'll drill a pilot for a screw and then countersink that so the screw isn't going to be touching the back. Like so. I'm going to cut some 5/8 inch dowels, it's about 16 millimeters in diameter, to something close to the right length, with the expectation that I'll have to do a bunch of careful trimming to get them to fit. Glue and screw on the end disc, sort of gauge how much has to come off. I want this obviously to push up. It's got to be really snug, but I don't want it so tight that it endangers the top or back or, wants to crack or something. I'll also clean out a spot in the center of the top between the two braces where I'm going to glue on a wide and fairly stout brace, which I've radiused to approximately the same contour as the top. I'll get that in there and clamp it up as well. Here's a shot of the neck block, which reveals some interesting things. Those dark gaps on the top and the bottom show that the block only contacts the plates in a very small area near the end of the heel. On the right-hand side, you can see that in the area of the cutaway, the excess height there was made up by gluing strips of something to the lining on top and bottom. This is why in this and other cutaway arch tops, Gibson would use strips of extra wide binding in that cutaway area. They didn't change the contour of their carving pattern to account for it. It was as if they were carving for a non-cutaway and, managed to make it work. The brace there also seems to tuck in on top against the block. I don't like the gaps. I think this small amount of contact could let the block tip forward a bit under tension and let the top move more than it needs to. So I'm making a couple of triangular glue blocks that will join the plates, the top and the back, to the neck block on its front surface. Just like a strip of lining. Before gluing, I have to make sure to clean off the decades worth of dust and cobwebs. To get the blocks positioned, I have a dowel of just the right length with a sharp metal point. I'll coat these generously with glue and then hold them in place for a minute or so, at which point they'll stay put. One last prop to go in under that new brace, right in front of the fingerboard. Okay, short of complete disassembly, this is as shored up as I can make this thing. This will have to do. Like a lot of these, this guitar has had a number of different sets of screw holes under the end cap there to realign the tailpiece and try to get the neck, pickup, and it into alignment. So, after all that, no real improvement. I think propping the braces had a cumulative effect of moving both the neck angle and the height of the soundboard in a 1-to-1 ratio. So one goes up, so does the other, leaving us exactly where we were. Factory action, no downward adjustability. I can't do any more. Next week, tune in to see me doing some bar fretting on an absolutely gorgeous 1920s Martin. I know a number of you have been asking about that. Now's your chance. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.